Now, I think many of you probably know about Sinclair Media. Now, that's the right-wing media company that John Oliver famously took down. TYT's talked about it. I've talked about it on the show. And look, they're basically a company that big media company that does right-wing propaganda that is tied to the president. Well, now everybody seems to have caught up because there is a video of hosts that work for Sinclair. This is a local news hosts that are, well, okay, so the video itself went viral, and I don't want to spoil it here, but basically it shows a lot of anchors giving a similar speech on fake news. Now, according to the New York Times, Timothy Burke, a video director at Deadspin, had read a report from CNN which quoted local station anchors who were uncomfortable with the speech. With this specific speech. Now, Mr. Burke tracked down the Sinclair affiliates and found out that they had aired what they called a forced read. Now, Burke then took the video or took video of all these different anchors, put them together in a video that went viral, and I want to show it to you here because I think that this is indicative of what they're trying to do. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 For once, I couldn't agree more. Wow. You know, when there is a shot where they had all of them lined up on one screen and all talking at the same time, I couldn't help think, you will be assimilated. Because that's what it sounded like, man. That is creepy. That is scary. So, now, again, I want to give huge credit to Timothy Burke for putting that together over at Deadspin. So you check that out. Now, secondly, this is what propaganda looks like. That's propaganda. Then you got people on the right that are like, oh, the propaganda, the liberals and their propaganda. No, that is what propaganda looks like. Reading off a script about fake news. Now, according to the New York Times, of course, that script came from Sinclair, which is the country's largest broadcaster. Now, they own about 193 television stations. And unfortunately, that number could get a lot bigger. They are looking to acquire Tribune Broadcasting. So that puts them in even more homes. Now, look, I've talked about media consolidation before, and I think that that's an enormous problem, right? And look, right now, media consolidation, we got like 6 companies that control almost all of what you see and hear on television. And that's disastrous. And now, like, this is cable television. Now we got Sinclair that's consolidating local television, local news. Again, that is disastrous. Now, look, on the 6 media companies that own cable, they have a bias. Of course they have a bias, right? That is an establishment bias. That is pro-business, pro-corporate, but also socially liberal. Now, it turns out they are that way because, yes, we're a business. We're a big corporation. Our bottom line relies on advertising. And look, we want to make sure not to offend people. So they're socially liberal because, well, turns out gay people, the LGBT community, and minority communities also have and spend money. And of course, generally, it's good PR not to discriminate against them. But as far as being pro-corporate, lower taxes, less regulation, more consolidation, that's the establishment. The Sinclair media, which is obviously very biased towards being right-wing, is even more dangerous. Because now they're saying, oh, socially acceptable, socially liberal positions? Ha! No. We're going to fearmonger about immigrants. We're going to fearmonger about other countries. We're going to fearmonger about all this stuff. So that's dangerous. And they're slipping that into your local news reports. And that, as they said before, is dangerous to democracy. Now, here's the thing, right? Now, look, the establishment media, and we've hit them a lot. Look, that's part of the reason they don't like Trump, is the fact that he promised to upend the establishment and he attacks the media. Now, Bernie Sanders also promised to upend the establishment, and corporate media, establishment media shits on him too. Right? Now, the only time that they don't shit on Trump, ironically, is when he launches missiles at Syria and ejects Russian diplomats. So if he does anything related to what the establishment wants, which is more war, well, then they're happily on his side. So just keep that in mind, right? That the mainstream media does have a bias, and that affects their opinions. Now, Sinclair, they have a bias as well, and that affects their narrative. And their narrative is fake news is bad and dangerous to democracy. And guess who's doing fake news? That's establishment media. So what they're doing is that they're taking pages from the Fox News playbook. Oh, no. You can't trust them. You can only trust us. We're going to give you the actual facts. We're going to give you the real news and not the fake news from the fake news media. Well, again, that's super dangerous because when you start telling people to trust one source and only one source, well, that leads to people who are misinformed. Now, look, those of you who watch this show, for example, I urge you to go out and find news from multiple sources. And because if I get something wrong, I want to know about it. And if I get something wrong, I want to make sure that you guys don't just take my word for it, that you go out and fact check for yourselves. And that you have the information available to say, hey, wait a minute, actually, I think you got that one wrong, dude. Oh, okay, hey, sorry. I just want to do the best that I can, and I realize that I'm one single human being, and that sometimes I get things wrong. But when it comes to organizations like Fox News, for example, and Sinclair, with these local stations, they're saying the opposite. Don't go out and fact check us. Believe us blindly, because we are the only ones that are out there telling you the truth. And as I said before, that is dangerous to democracy, to use their own words, because a functioning democracy depends on people who are well-informed of the issues. And what Sinclair and what a lot of right-wing media does is they misinform, and they do so on purpose because they try to push a narrative. And so that's one of the big problems. Now, are a lot of people happy about reading that script? No. Actually, they're not. In fact, last week, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer published a copy of the speech and reported that employees at a local news station there, KOMO, were very unhappy about the script. And I'm not surprised. You get handed down a script from on high, and you're like, wait a minute, this sounds like the president. I don't agree with the president. Maybe I'm more liberal. Maybe I'm more progressive, and I don't agree with that. And maybe I'm just more of a journalist and I want to continue practicing journalistic ethics, and this is a violation of what journalism is actually supposed to be. I'm not in favor of this. I'm not comfortable with this. Now, again, that these people's jobs are now on the line, because if you don't read the script, then you're going to lose your job. And then you're going to replace them with somebody who will read the script. And again, that's what's so dangerous about this, and so dangerous about how much of the media pie they're actually going to take. Now, I actually do have some good news on that. But for one, let me give you some more stats. Now, first, CNN reported on March 7th and said that Scott Livingston, the senior vice president of news for Sinclair, had recently read the exact same speech as recently as a year ago, as it was distributed to outlets. So this situation has been happening for a while. And again, big credit to John Oliver for being the first to really tackle that using his platform. But it's not enough. I mean, we've actually got to do something to stop this, because the problem is that people trust their local news. They trust it to not be corrupted with a certain bias or a certain narrative. And look, when you do opinion is fine. If you want to do an opinion piece, I do opinion pieces all the time. We're an opinion show. So, and I make that very, very clear from the outset. I take facts and then I do my opinion on it. The problem is that most people watching their local news don't consider that to be opinion, which it's increasingly turning into with its basis on being a pro-conservative, pro-Trump station, or being owned by a pro-Trump station. So what they're doing is that they're taking information, or they're taking opinion, and passing it off as information. They're passing it off as facts. And it's right under your nose, often from newscasters that you have grown to trust. Now, I'm going to give you a disappointing stat, and then I'm going to give you a good stat. Now, more people, unfortunately, trust their local news. According to a Morning Consult political poll conducted in August of last year, they found that 41% of registered voters have more trust in their local news outlets to report the truth, while 27% said they have more faith in the truthfulness of national news coverage. So, look, people don't already trust the cable news, and that's part of the Trump effect. Trump saying, oh, you can't trust mainstream fake news. You can't do any of that. No. You can only trust... You can trust your local news, and you can trust Fox News. Now, unfortunately, most voters, or a lot of voters, a majority of voters, trust their local news, which is now very likely to be owned by Sinclair. So there's good news, though. Around the same time, Pew Research did a poll and found that 43% of Americans report often getting news online. That is 7 percentage points lower than the 50% who often get news on television. Now, that has been growing exponentially. People have been turning to online news to actually get their news. In fact, this gap between the two news platforms was 19 points in early 2016, more than twice as large. So that gap has been shrinking between people who get their news online and people who get their news from cable television. And I think a lot of that has to do with more younger people that are interested in watching news online. As somebody who does an online show, I think that's great news. But I think that's also good news because there are a lot of actors that are independent, that don't take corporate money, that don't have a corporate bottom line, and will actually try to give you the facts. And then, you know, like I do opinion on those facts. So, and look, there's a downside to that as well. That's why you're seeing a lot of pressure on, for example, Facebook and YouTube to go after independent media as a way to, of course, fight fake news that isn't part of the establishment. So, look, the establishment obviously wants to fight independent progressive media. And, of course, Sinclair also would probably like to fight independent progressive media. And so, and that's because a lot of independent progressive media does news and commentary that usually goes against both the conservative and establishment lines. So I think it's a way to kill progressive points of view, which unfortunately threatens both of them. So just be aware of that. Nonetheless, what Sinclair is doing is incredibly disastrous for the news and media atmosphere, and I hope there is a way to be able to counter that, to be able to stop them from having so much of a consolidation over news. So, or hopefully more people abandon news, abandon cable news and these giant corporations in favor of smaller independent media outlets who will actually tell you the truth. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.